This is called the Memory Equity Strategy. Under Armour built something in 2021, but it grew to revenue to a record 5.7 billion. In this video, I share how they did it with the Memory Equity Strategy, what it is, how it's built, and what happens when you stop earning it, as well as the GPT that will help you in the next strategy so you can apply it to your business. Let's dive in. 2021 Flow State Challenge campaign over by Under Armour. They had 54,000 runners who completed it, massive community of real participants who finished the challenge. The results were 127 million Instagram views. You can see that link over in the newsletter. Organic reach driven actually by user-generated content and community sharing, what is now known as community marketing. 35% footwear revenue increase, direct lift on the product category tied to the challenge. And the result was a $5.7 billion total revenue. The company record at that time, the highest in Under Armour's history. And mind you, during the pandemic, people are stressed, people are in their little bubbles, right? And then here comes this great challenge to get outside, to breathe the fresh air, and to run and to exercise and to build social experience together. But 2005, there's a problem. And what was that problem? About 4 years later, the revenue was down 9%. And the CEO sent out a public question. How do we reignite the brand's relevance? And this is what happens when a brand earns something once, but then they stop earning it. Do you have a business like that? If you do, this might be the strategy for you. The record wasn't a foundation that they built upon. It was peaked that they were walking away from. It was the peak that they had earned that they now had lost, and they were trying to get it back. So what do you do with memory equity? What is it? Memory equity strategy is the collection of shared experiences your audience carries in their body. Let's talk about the difference between transactional equity and memory equity here. So take, for instance, Under Armour's typical runner. They finish 30 miles in your shoe, that's your product, and it has evidence of something real. That evidence lives in their muscles, their memory, their identity. I did this challenge, this is who I am, and in their community. Dude, you totally ran a 30K. And that solidifies that sense of values and operation. Like operationally, that's not just a shoe. They have sold an entire brand identity to the customer, and they have embraced it themselves, and now they're sharing it and distributing it. So the purchase was just the entry point. Transactional equity is what a customer remembers about buying your product. The smell of the new shoe, how it felt going in to purchase that product, what happened directly after to hopefully satisfy a significant pain. But memory equity goes a step further. It's not just about remembering buying the product. That's simply transactional. That's a bit shallow level, still helpful. There's all sorts of levels in business that you can be a part of. But memory equity goes even further. Memory equity is what a customer remembers about becoming someone through your product. It's about becoming someone through your product. Let's unpack this just a little bit more. So how did Under Armour really build up? Well, first off, they own the platform. My Run was where the challenge lived. Not rented social media space, although it was all over Instagram, but they had created a platform that was theirs. It wasn't rented. That was their own. They controlled it with the data that they owned. Number two, they built a performance promise. If you hit 30 miles in 30 days, that's just 1 mile a day, a goal tied directly to what Under Armour claims to stand for athletic performance and endurance are yours. Then there's the aspirational prize, number three, a reward aspirational enough to train toward something worth earning and not just clicking. Every completed run generated this UGC. Every share brought in new participants, and AR Filter let runners prove the moment that it actually happened. Now, Nike runs the same pattern continuously. NRC, monthly challenges, digital badges, community leadership boards. They have one activation, it builds buzz, notifications, creates that moment, generates a spike of metrics. Under Armour ran it once. Nike never stopped. That's part of the difference here. The gap between a record year and a declining brand is often just a decision to keep going or not. So that's where Nike and Under Armour differ here. And probably what would have happened in 2005, it would have completely been avoided if they had continued from 2001 with Under Armour's Flow Challenge all the way up to 2005. So that continuous activation builds memory equity year after year, creates identity, and it actually compounds over year. You get more people who say, I'm going to beat that challenge from last year. So let me talk a little bit about where this pattern worked. It didn't just work for Under Armour, it actually worked for Nike Run Club. Nike Digital Transformation Run Club, this developer made a blog. Nike ran this continuously through what they called the Nike Run Club app. They had weekly challenges, monthly distance goals, digital achievement badges. The incentive was social status, community belonging, and the same things race day used to provide before the app replaced. So in other words, every challenge completed feeds an owned behavioral data set while reinforcing Nike's performance identity in ways no ad buy can even replicate. And the results say it all. Millions of active athletes logging challenges across a global owned platform. The data stays with Nike. They own the information. It's the same pattern. It's just using sports technology. The second example where this strategy worked well was actually with Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard had something called hashtag HP Radical Reuse. And they challenged TikTok creators to show how they reuse materials in everyday life, tied to their use of ocean collected plastics, corporate sustainability commitment. The incentive was just this recognition on a platform built around transformational content. And the end result was a sustainability message that probably would have died as a press release, but it became a cultural conversation because the mechanism turned spectators into participants for the brand. So the results for that were 1.4 billion views, 1.2 million user created videos. So here you go. The participants in community marketing are actually extending the brand forward. 5.9% lift in ad recall. That's really impressive numbers. And 1.9% lift in brand favorability. So yes, you are buying plastics and ink for your Hewlett Packard, but guess what? You're also sustaining the environment. We're trying to make a change. That's what they call consumer technology. And the third one was Lego Ideas. Lego made the challenge permanent, submitted an original set design, build community support up to 10,000 voters, and they got reviewed for official production. Winners got to see their creation manufactured and sold worldwide, plus a royalty percentage. And Lego just turned their passionate customers into their product development pipeline, not just once, but as a standing architecture of how new producers get built. Remember, I said earlier about the difference between Under Armour and Nike here. Nike continued with what worked. Lego continued with what worked. And it's just a part of their standing architecture in their brand. You have a great idea. You want to build something, show us, and we will submit it to those fans. And we're going to do a voting process to advance the production review. So again, this is the same pattern, but now for consumer goods. And we have three companies, three industries, one mechanism, one architecture that all have to do with this utilizing memory equity. But I want to caution you, there is a way to get this memory equity wrong. And in fact, there are three brands that got it wrong. McDonald's with their Mickey D's Stories in 2012, Pepsi Refresh Project in 2010, and YouTube Rewind in 2018. And just to go over those real quick, why did those fail? Well, McDonald's with their Mickey D's Stories, what they did was they invited customers to share warm memories on Twitter. No owned platform. That was mistake number one. Maybe mistake number one was actually getting people on Twitter to comment because they were brutal back then. And it's just an open public square. So they didn't own the information. They didn't own the votes. They didn't own the platform. Within 1 hour, replies documented food poisoning and worse. 72,788 negative tweets in under an hour. That campaign canceled the day it was launched. It's the same break, no owned platform. They just let it run wild. And that didn't work out for them very well at all. In fact, number two was the Pepsi Refresh Project of 2010. Pepsi redirected 20 million into a community voting platform for grassroots social causes, and the engagement was genuine. Memory equity, however, requires the shared experience to run through the brand's actual promise. And the experience of drinking Pepsi was actually never part of the Pepsi Refresh project. It was just a community voting platform for social causes. So there were 80 million votes, 18 million unique visitors, but Pepsi sales declined 6%. Campaign discontinued after just 2 years. It's the same break. Challenge is disconnected from the brand's promise. So your memory equity strategy has to have a connection to the product. It can't just be social causes. And the third mistake was YouTube Rewind in 2018. YouTube tried to position their annual rewind as a community reflection. Creators immediately recognized that it just felt too corporate. This is a production, and it was filtering out everything genuine and popular. So the community had no real voice in the matter. And that's another thing about memory equity is you got to get the community to participate with you. They had over 20 million dislikes before YouTube removed the counter. Format discontinued after 2019. Community voice under management. So you can't manage the community voice too much either. So this is a failure condition and it's always structural. And the diagnostic question you probably want to ask, there's about 4 of them that I'll be presenting to you very shortly. But as you can see, there are at least 3 ways to get this right, or 4 ways to get it right if you're considering Under Armour, and 3 ways to get it really wrong. Just a little side comment here about the strategy signal. Whenever I try to think about marketing intelligence, I try to think through the lens of either psychology, anthropology, psychology, or even religion. And in this case, I want to just think about what the body remembers. In this memory equity strategy, 54,000 runners did more than just buy a shoe. They finished something very difficult side by side by 53,999 strangers, and they had data, something tangible, to prove it. Robin Dunbar, Oxford's known social bonding scientist. He was an evolutionary psychologist at Oxford and best known for what's now called Dunbar's number. I've seen this a lot in religious contexts where communities, once they hit the 150 mark, people feel a loss of meaningful connection. You might want to think about that too for your product, your SaaS product, or for your e-course. Once it hits 150 students, you might want to think about how you can divvy it up and break it up. Anyway, and his research really focused on synchronizing physical activity bonds to bond humans together. And he found that synchronized movement, especially physical, toward a shared goal, releases more endorphins and deepens social bonds faster than any other human activity. Why wouldn't marketers try to use something like that? So this body of ours, it registers finishing together as this social evidence. 12 months of solo miles have produced all these endorphins with these racers. And the oxytocin, Simon Sinek in his leadership book, Leaders Eat Last, talks about the leadership hormone. This bonds leaders to followers. The oxytocin requires a witness. And what Under Armour was building in 2001 of March was, in the language of depth psychology, a container. It's this bonded space where transformation becomes actually possible. And it becomes a motivating force, releasing not only bonding chemicals to each other, but also dopamine to increase the amount of motivation going forward. And this very element is actually very ancient. Pilgrimage. People go on spiritual pilgrimages all the time, and they work the same way. They share a same ordeal with a defined end, and they're working on the same path. So the brands that understand this aren't designing campaigns anymore. What they're designing are rites of passage. And Under Armour in 2001 and later in 2005 earned that belonging. And that's the very thing that brands are still trying to buy. 4 questions before you build it. Number 1, do you own the platform? Do they have own platform where the challenge can live, not borrowed social media, real estate? Performance. Number 2, performance promise. Not just good feel cause, but actual performance statistics that they can own for themselves and measurable and tangible. Number 3, aspirational prize. Not just impressive on paper, but does it work for a specific audience with what they want to be and who they want to become? And number 4, sustained commitment. Can they sustain it past the very first activation? And hopefully you get a crowd and a brand like Nike that want to do it every year. That would be the goal. So you don't have that dip that the CEO talked about at Under Armour, where he's asking the whole company, what do we do in this case when 9% drop? Memory equity erodes when you stop earning it. I just mentioned that right now. The question worth asking your clients is, which of them has an owned platform, a real performance promise, and a community already forming around something very meaningful? Find the owned platform if you can, connect to a real promise, and sustain that past activation. Now, if you're saying, that's great, Matt, I've heard everything you say, I think this could be a real good strategy, but to listen to this again and try to think about it myself would be too difficult. No worries, I got you. There's a GPT right down in the description called the Memory Equity Strategy Analyzer, where you can look at the full strategy tour. You can analyze your campaign or your client's campaign with it. Why did this campaign work? And it'll even create a client-ready strategy deck using Mermaid Markdown so that you can upload a gamma just like over here and have a presentation ready by Monday morning. By the way, if this was really helpful, super appreciate if you can swing on over to the Strategy Signal on Substack. You can see the full newsletter, GPT, and YouTube video all in one place. I'm really looking forward to continuing this content. Thanks again, and bye for now.